is, but one of our main focuses is on the preparedness area. I'm not sure if you have seen our car driving around or have heard of the Wimmera 72 website, but that is a bit of a package that we've put together to help people be ready essentially for the first 72 hours in emergencies. So I'm going to speak to you today about kind of thinking about the summer readiness for businesses in terms of fires, heat waves, and that being prepared for that first 72 hours, and also how you can prepare your business before and then recover afterwards a heat wave or a fire. So moving on, I will just very quickly run through an acknowledgement of country. I know it's already been done, but I'd like to acknowledge that this training session is being presented on the traditional lands of the Wotjobaluk, Jadwa, Jadwajali, Wagaya and Jopagalt people, and I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. So why summer readiness matters. Obviously out here in the Wimmera and the Mallee, it's the weather is quite intense. You know, we've got Kerry on board at the moment who is in Ballarat and experienced vastly different weather to what we had here yesterday. So it's really important to be aware of our kind of localized area and the risks that are posed. So obviously we have hotter and drier summers in the Wimmera region, which are increasing the intensity of and frequency of the fires and heat waves, which we also saw over the summer period that's just passed as well. The disasters can impact businesses through staff availability, because of evacuations, road and school closures. People just can't make it because of all the tricky little things that are kind of put into place as part of different processes around. Customer disruptions, so a decline in foot traffic due to heat wave, or, you know, same again, the evacuations or orders put in place, road closures and things due to fires. Online orders and delivery delays can also occur. There can be supply chain breakdowns, so that could be due to transport routes being cut, fuel shortages and things like that, and then property damage or access loss to those properties. Disruptions can impact staff, customers, supply chains, and the operations of your business. The first 72 hours after an emergency are often unsupported as emergency services prioritise life safety and critical infrastructure. Businesses who plan early show measurably faster recovery and lower economic loss after emergencies. So the first thing that you need to prioritize is actually having an understanding of your risks. So not only for the risks of living in the Wimmera or the specific place that you live, but also the risks that are pertinent to your business. So obviously fire risk, and there's a lot of information out here from the CFA. They do such a fantastic job in, you know, having your getting all the plan information out and emphasizing the importance around having your plan. But with the fire risk, just the basic things to look at are when you're understanding your risk is the proximity to grassland, forest or industrial storage, so you have an understanding of how you may be impacted if there is a fire. If there's narrow roads or single access points, so no turnaround areas for trucks, and any accumulated combustible materials around your site. In terms of heat wave risk, the things to think about would be the indoor temperature rising beyond safe working levels, machinery or computer servers overheating, perishable stocks, which may be temperature sensitive, and then the business risk factors, which are the reliance on electricity for FPOS, refrigeration, pumps, workshop equipment, etc., high staff exposure to the outdoor elements, and industries with critical timelines. So obviously when we speak about businesses and we're speaking about their risk, I'm trying to cover as broad a kind of umbrella as I possibly can, because obviously we've got shops, and then we've got who was it? Someone online who was running their HR business from home. And then we've got Michelle from Wades. So it's such a variety of people. We've got Jess in here who's on a farm. So I'm just trying to cover off as much as I can. So while some things might not speak to you directly, there will be other things that kind of do hone in on things that would be relevant to you. So preparing before summer. First of all, you should review and update your business continuity plan. So you think about what services must remain operational, how you would function with no power. So, you know, the loss of internet or FPOS, how would you function during that? You identify critical staff roles and conduct pre-summer briefings with all staff so that expectations are clear and preparation for staff shortages is in place. So when those evacuations hit, you kind of have a bit of a contingency plan to maintain that business continuity. You ensure your insurance policy covers your current assets and includes business interruption if needed. And I think another key point there would also be to have everything very well documented with photos of it, anything that's insured, because afterwards, if you are impacted and you don't have everything really well documented, they might not be able to pay out on that. Digitize important documents and store copies off-site or in cloud storage. That's a really important one because if it's all in one place and it gets destroyed or you don't have access because you've had to relocate, you can't, you've pretty much lost everything for at least a little while anyway. And I guess the issue with having it in cloud storage, if an emergency does actually impact and the communications go out and the power goes out, you still can't access that. Hard copies is always best, but also not always attainable, which is acknowledgeable. So if it's at least backed up in the cloud, you'll be able to access it at some point. And then review your emergency shutdown procedures for days of extreme or catastrophic danger. So fire-ready business actions. So if you maintain a 20 to 30 metre zone of reduced fuel around buildings where possible, that'll obviously decrease your risk. You remove fine fuels, dry grass, rubbish, cardboard boxes and pallets, clean your gutters, roof valleys and check for debris buildup. Test your pumps and sprinklers and backup water sources such as water tanks and generators, especially on the farm when you've got animals to feed, to hydrate. Store flammable or hazardous materials in approved containers and away from exposure. Prepare a business go folder, keys, supplier lists, insurance documents, USB with essential files, staff contact lists, and decide when to close on high risk days and communicate this clearly with staff and customers. Heatwave preparedness actions would be have a heatwave action plan. So have an idea of what your indoor temperature triggers are for stopping work, adjusting your work hours if you can with an early start or an early finish, and modify duties for exposed workers. Ensure adequate ventilation and cooling, so fans, cooling units and blinds can be installed. Provide staff with drinking water, cooling breaks, shaded rest areas, and have first aid trained staff who can recognise heat stress. Identify equipment vulnerable to overheating, such as refrigerators, server rooms, FPOS, and internet hardware. Consider customers and clients. Offer water, provide shaded or indoor waiting areas, adjust operations to minimise exposure to heat. So I think that's it's something that we don't really think about when we think about what might actually be vulnerable to overheating. I know yesterday one of our teams had to go and do a little bit of field work and they had an iPad, and because of the hotter day the iPad actually overheated, so in the end they had to take 3 with them and put the others on ice to kind of bring them back down to temperatures so they could be used again. And it wasn't even an extreme weather day yesterday. So just things to consider which you normally wouldn't, which could then be put into your action plan to kind of maintain that first 72 hours after an emergency. So the WMR 72 concept, why the first 72 hours? So emergency services may be unable to reach all areas due to road blockages, active fires and a high demand in the region. And I think we all experienced a little bit of this last year with the Grampians fires and the Little Desert fires, and we saw Dimbulla kind of was shut down for a few days and Halls Gap as well. It was such a economic impact, a high economic impact. We also had Wartook on this side of the Grampians. As soon as they start closing roads, people can't access, tourism drops, and it makes it really, really difficult. But during an emergency services, they just are so stretched, especially out here where the resources are minimized and they have to activate task force teams and strike teams to actually come out as well. It, there's not always the guarantee that they will be able to get to you. And if you're blocked in because the tree's fallen over your road, you could be stuck there for potentially 3 days. So essential services may fail. Power outages can last hours to days, water pressure can drop, FPOS can fail, and mobile network congestion can occur prior to mobile towers failing. Businesses are encouraged to be self-sufficient for 72 hours to reduce reliance on strained emergency systems. The first 72 hours are crucial for stabilizing operations and reducing long-term loss. Being ready helps the whole community recover faster. What businesses need for the first 72 hours? So they need to think about power and lighting, so whether they have a generator or a power bank for charging their phones, battery operated lanterns and torches, some water, so drinking water, supplies for staff, additional water for cooling, heating and caring for animals, communications, so printed contact lists, battery radios, satellite phones, if you're in really high risk areas and kind of have access to that. In terms of operations, hard copies of forms and manuals if possible. Manual payment options such as a cash float, carbon copy, receipt book, backup storage for perishable goods if possible. Staff welfare, roster flexibility, welfare checks, mental health and fatigue considerations, and logistics. So alternate supplies, backup transport routes, agreements with nearby businesses for potential shared support. Staff and customer safety. So create a staff emergency communications plan. So you have an SMS chain, a WhatsApp, chat or alert system to contact each other, and predetermined check-in times. If people are working out in the field, you set those check-in times so that you can have that constant contact with them so that you're doing just making sure that they're okay. For customers, clear signage on high-risk days, instructions on evacuation or shelter procedures, and the ability to quickly close or reload customers if needed. And I think that one's a really important one when you're thinking about motels and hotels and places where there would just be people kind of staying in a longer kind of capacity. Define emergency roles so everyone knows what to do. Ensure staff know how to recognise early signs of heat stress, smoke inhalation impacts, panic or confusion during fast-moving events. Pre-identify safe assembly points, including an indoor option for heat waves, and keep accessibility needs in mind for both staff and customers. I think it's very important. Returning to operations after an emergency. So after that 72 hours is done and everything's starting to be cleaned up and the roads are starting to open up and you have access back to your business again, very important to conduct a thorough site safety inspection first for falling branches, live wires, roof damage, spoiled goods, water contamination, just to name a few. Document all damage with photos before cleaning anything up. Contact your suppliers, insurance, and local council if you've noticed any structural impacts. And have your services restored. So your power, you're able to turn on your fridge again, get everything running, up and going, all your IT, and start to get back into it. Provide staff debriefs to support emotional well-being. Very, very important. I think emergencies really impact people in ways that we don't realize. And if people were stuck for 72 hours without being able to evacuate or get anywhere, it's very important to have those debriefs. And then review what worked and update your business continuity plan with your lessons learned. We've got a few resources. So obviously the Vic Emergency app and hotline, something that everyone should have on their phone. Wimmera 72 toolkit is available on the Wimmera 72 website, which is on the next page. And the Department of Health has a couple of websites and apps as well. Local council business support is available. DJ Sir is available for economic support. When you think back to Hall's Gap and how economically impacted they were, they tapped into DJ Sir a lot, and there were grants available and strategies in place to assist them with getting back on track economically. And then your local business networks are really good to tap into as well. And my final message is preparing now reduces the risk, protects livelihoods, and improves resilience. The first 72 hours are absolutely crucial for business survival and continuity. You don't rise to the level of an emergency, you fall to the level of your planning. So start today. If you were to try one action towards planning, you could update your contacts, review your fire plan, stock an emergency kit so that you can grab it and leave, or just test your equipment. The Wimmera Emergency Management Team and Wimmera 72 resources are there to help. So everyone who we reference or anyone who, if you're not really sure where to go, when to start planning, if you just pop onto that website, we've got links that'll take you to the correct places. Thank you.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much for your presentation. And I wasn't aware of the Wimmera 72 website, so I'll be definitely off to check it out a little bit later today. So encourage anyone that's got any questions or any points to raise to reach out to Christy, and I'm sure she'd love to hear from you. So thank you very much. Now I'm up next, and I have to apologise. I'm sitting at my boss's desk because we're a bit tight. And I'm not familiar with his tech, so let's press this button and see if it works. Can we see? Hang on, now I've lost my window. Oh. Okay, can we see the presentation, or is that not working? Oh, here we go. Present. Sorry. PowerPoint Live, loading your presentation. There we go. Yay! Sorry, and thank you for your patience. Following on from Christy's great presentation, you'll notice a little bit of intersect between what she's talking about, what I'm talking about, which is great because it means I'm on the right track. So I'll be talking to you today about business continuity planning. So business continuity planning is, and you did hear Christy referring to business continuity plans, it's a way for businesses to consider how you're going to keep running when life throws you a curveball. So we know in the Wimmera Southern Valley region that we have our share of disrupted days. We have fires, we have floods, we have days when the internet and the power decides it needs a mental health break. So business continuity plan is a way for you as a business to think ahead in terms of how you respond to those incidents. I've got a very quick bonus slide in here because I love statistics. This slide actually looks at our regional business count number. It's comparing 2007 to 2024 against the national and the state averages. And we can see significant growth at a national and a state level. And if we work our way down through the list, we're actually looking at significant business decline throughout Yarriambiack and the region as a whole, with some standout areas that are performing better than others. So I only raise this to really highlight the fact that uncertainty is inherent in business. All right, so on to the fun stuff. What is a business continuity plan? So it's really just a practical guide to get you operating during and after a disruption. So it's taking advantage of the fact that your calm brain is much more effective at thinking about how to plan than your chaos brain. So when something happens, a business continuity plan is future you helping future you work through the process of resolving this issue and giving future you a plan. So what is it? It's a practical plan for how your business will continue to operate during and after disruption. It identifies really critical functions. So what's important in your business? The important people, everyone's important, but the particularly important people in an emergency, systems and alternatives, and helps you respond more quickly, reduce downtime and protect revenue and your key stakeholders. So as Christy said, businesses who plan earlier recover quicker in an incident. All right, so what might a business continuity plan look at? So here's some of the hazards that can disrupt your business. So some of these we're very familiar with, and our natural hazards in terms of floods, fire, storms and power outages and heat, which Christy's covered off on beautifully to a point. So they can impact on infrastructure, on your premises, on your people. There can be freight delays, spoilage, any number of incidents, any number of consequences of these incidents. even through to childcare closures, things like that, and not being able to get through to different places. So very, very disruptive. We can also talk about infrastructure and supply chain disruptions, so road closures, rail disruption, telecommunications outages and utilities failures. So what happens if the power goes out for 3 days? How is your business going to respond to an incident like that? And what if your internet and your phone goes down? How are you going to continue to run as a business? Okay. So we can talk about workforce disruptions, and we've all had a very relevant run-in with pandemics in the past few years. So we know how illnesses can impact on businesses. But it could be something as simple as, we had a really bad flu season last year. So I don't know what your business was like, but we had a lot of people out. You turn up to a meeting and only a third of the people would be there because we had people out with the flu. But that also impacts on people with kids. So if you can't come to work because your child's sick at home, how does that impact on your business and your staffing availability? And it's also important to think about mental health and wellbeing after a disaster. So we know that if we are strained in the mental health space, it impacts on productivity and decision making. It impacts on workplace culture and staff attendance. So technology and cyber events, these are becoming more and more prevalent. So every time I think that it can't get any worse, we hear another incident where a third-party software application or a malware attack or some sort of virus has integrated people's systems. And it feels like you can plan and protect and firewall as much as you like. People are the ultimate weakest link, and they will continue to be a problem. So how do you respond in the incidence of a cyber attack or a critical systems failure? So like your accounting software goes down, a point of sale or an FPOS outage. All these things can really, really disrupt your business and how you continue to operate. And the old other slide. So other is just acknowledging the fact that life is unexpected. So it could be a theft or a break-in or vandalisation. It could be equipment failure. So what are your really key systems and your pieces of equipment that mean you cannot continue to operate? Maybe it's a cool room. Maybe it's something in your manufacturing system. Maybe it's your fleet. What is going to disrupt your business? Thinking about these things early can really help you plan for key equipment failure. And Chris's computer is doing me over again. All right, so I'm just giving a really quick local example. This one's a little while ago, but it was a significant issue for a lot of businesses. So simple event where there was a fire in a telephone exchange in Telstra Exchange in Warrnambool. It knocked out the phone, the internet and the mobile phones of over 100,000 people in southwest Victoria. Any business that started with a 5 or any phone number that started with 55, including Eden Hopes. This is relevant to this area. Services took up to 20 days to be restored. During that time, there was no FPOS. There was no ATMs. You couldn't pump fuel because the systems weren't working there. And it was incredibly disruptive, particularly for small communities. So the key lessons from this one was that a single point of failure really highlights the need for redundancy, that temporary infrastructure is essential for emergency recovery, and that major social, business and emergency services impact emphasise planning for communications outages. So you may be thinking, why does any of this matter to me? I'm just a small business. Small businesses, they feel disruption faster and harder than larger organisations. Often there's not the spare staff. Cash flow might be a little bit more restricted. Your backup systems may not be as sophisticated. So a disruption that might not impact on a large company can really slow you down or stop you. So what a good continuity plan does is it reduces panic, it speeds recovery and helps you focus on what matters the most. Your key stakeholders, your revenue, and honestly, a plan like this reduces the number of decisions that you have to make when you're under pressure, which is good because your disaster brain is not your best brain. So what might be included in business continuity and plan? A little bit of crossover again with what Christy was talking about. I encourage you to think about her really practical applications of some of these functions. So we need to know what are your essential functions. So the things within your business and your systems which absolutely must continue and you must protect. You need really strong clarity on your people and who has roles in different scenarios, including backups. So maybe due to road closures or illness, whatever it might be, your key people are not available. What's your plan to fill those roles? So this is one that I think touched on a little bit with Christy. So communications templates. So again, sitting down to write a very carefully articulated email and SMS, whatever it might be, is really tricky when you're under pressure. You will have people looking to you for answers about what comes next and what needs to happen. A communication template allows you, while you're calm, to think about the steps that you might take in different scenarios to move forward. Data and systems backups, and again, Christy touched on this one. So make sure that you have cloud versions of everything, but also in the case of a cloud unavailability, make sure you have hard copies of key documents. Make sure you have them very well accessible. So, and potentially multiple versions. People need to know where to find this information because maybe you're the one that's not there in that particular day. We need backups. So backups are really key, but what a lot of people don't talk about is the importance of testing your backups. So there is no point having a backup if it isn't actually there or if you can't actually restore it. It's completely pointless. Okay. So I'm just going to scan across there. Chris, why are you doing this to me? Okay, so steps to build your plan. All right, so I've got a couple of slides on this and I won't dwell on it for too long because I'm running close to time. So the first thing you want to do is map out your key operations that keep you in business. The second thing that you want to do is to capture your key contacts. So we're talking suppliers, staff, customers, potentially look at identifying alternatives. So if you are selling products from a specific supplier and that supply chain is disrupted, what's your backup plan? Third thing we want to do is to draft a communication plan. So templates for staff, templates for customers, templates to suppliers to allow you to effectively communicate in times when you need to get information out there. Okay. This is the big one, back up your data and actually test restoring it. Many businesses, when they actually need their backups, they find they don't work. Worst possible day, don't be that business. Set clear recovery priorities and timelines. So you want to make sure that that you train your staff, you review and you plan annually. So don't develop a business continuity plan, put it on a shelf, never look at it again. That will not help you out when you need it. And make sure it's accessible. I think I've touched on that one. So business continuity plan, it doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to exist. Think of it as a plan that's like a fire extinguisher. It's better to have one that's a bit dusty than to not have one at all. I just found a new button that'll help you navigate better. That's good. Okay, if you are really bored right now and you have no intentions of ever doing a business continuity plan, I've developed just a 10-minute practical checklist I'm calling it BCP Light. I like that. This is the simplest version of continuity plan. And the point of this checklist is to just get you thinking about these things. So first step, identify the top 3 things that will stop you from trading tomorrow. Assign a responsible person for each and just get them thinking about what alternatives might be and how you might respond. Capture your key contacts. It's a really important business function, even outside business continuity. Make sure that you've got all the contact details of the people that you need to reach. Make sure your backups exist and have backups. Print your emergency contacts. Make sure that they are accessible and available and up to date. And prepare 1 or 2 communication templates with your key stakeholders. So 10 minutes of planning now can save you days or weeks of chaos later. So if you are a little bit like me and a little bit dull, you might be really excited right now. So I'm going to give you a resource to help you find out more, should you choose to do so. And you'll get a gold star if you do. Business continuity support can be found on the VMIA website. So it's an agency that's aimed at the government, but there are some really relevant documents on there for small business. So we've got some practical guidance and templates for some of this sort of stuff. Got a bit of a learning hub and some training modules. We have some risk assessment tools and checklists, because who doesn't love them, and some case studies and real-world examples of where business continuity plans have been enacted and the difference it's made to businesses. And that's me. I'm done. Sorry, I'm looking at Simone thinking she's going to ask who comes next, but it's going to be me,
well,
isn't it?
is there any questions from anyone for Jess? Because I know she's got to fly soon. So anyone got any questions?
Easy. Very good. All right, I'll have to go. Oh, thank you, Lisa. If anyone has any questions or they would like to sit down, have coffee and talk about business continuity plan, please do reach out to me. I would be delighted.
Okay, thank you, Jess.
Okay, thank you. I just have to stop sharing and work out how. Hang on. PowerPoint. I don't know how to turn it off now.
I've used Chris's screens once before and I was feeling your pain, Jess.
Oh, I didn't, nothing
I know.
works. Yeah, anyway. And I
The
can't
unique
actually
setup.
turn this off. Yeah, I have been set up. So there's a lesson there. All right, how about if I just close PowerPoint down and see what happens then?
Well, while
right,
you're
I might
doing
just
that,
leave.
we'll
If
introduce
I leave,
Kerry.
then I'm disconnected.
Yeah.
Thank you. See you later, everyone. Bye.
Thanks. See ya.
And Simone, I was just wondering, I wanted to check in with Michelle too, in the interests of Michelle, your time, whether maybe Michelle could
Yeah.
go before me. Would that be okay with you,
Yeah,
Michelle? Yeah.
that would be great if I could, because we're getting close to others going on lunches and that sort of stuff. I can hear the phone ringing in the background, so that'd be great.
Yeah. That'd be great.
Yeah, so I guess I've just been asked to talk about our policies and that sort of thing. So I've just written down a few things. Obviously, we've got up to 35 technicians out in the field. So we've developed SunSmart policies and a heat stress policy that they're all given as part of their handbooks when they start with us. But being technicians, we don't rely on them just reading them and understanding everything. So we do, before summer hits, we do toolbox meetings before the season, just reminding them of the policies and that sort of thing. So some of the things that we do is we obviously keep track of the weather. If it's looking like it's going to be a high weather day like it was yesterday, we do try and limit the roof work that the boys are doing, or if it's unavoidable, get them out there early, and then doing the inside parts of things in the later times of the day where they've got air conditioning and that sort of stuff. We provide them with the appropriate PPE, so sunscreen, sun hats, long sleeves, all of that sort of thing. We make sure that they take more regular breaks than what they may normally do, especially if they are, out in the heat a lot. So we do ask them to take, breaks on a lot more regular basis than what they do on a normal day. We also just make sure that they're using that SunSmart, they're drinking more water, they're, just looking after themselves. And we do some training on what heat stroke looks like and that sort of thing. So our senior guys are well aware of looking after the apprentices, that sort of thing. And then we usually have a freezer full of icy poles for them when they get back to the office. So that's kind of what we do with the technicians out in the field. But just from listening to the other two presenters this morning, I actually thought, well, what do we do in the office as well? With the power outages and that sort of stuff. We are lucky that we've got one computer on a battery backup system. So we've always got access to that, which can be hotspotted to mobile phones. Everything that we do is online. So everything is cloud-based. So we really are impacted if the power goes out or if the phone systems go out or that sort of thing. And I guess, it's just managing that. We can work from home if we need to. So if we don't have power in the office, we can always, send people home and get set up at home if if that's an option for them to do that. Yeah, so I mean, luckily we haven't been impacted on multiple days of, you know, outages and that sort of thing. Occasionally our internet will go down, or, you know, we've changed the system, but we seem to be able to manage that quite well. So yeah, that was really all I had in my notes.
Thanks so much, Michelle. Has anyone got any questions for Michelle?
I've
I
got
like-
one.
yeah.
Thanks for that, Michelle. I was just curious, sometimes I work sometimes with operational outdoor areas, and one of the interesting pushbacks sometimes is around long sleeves, long pants when it's hot, and can we wear shorts?
Yep.
Just curious to know if that's come up. You mentioned kind of you can't just hand out something and go, that's good to go in terms of policies. But has that been a feature of your workplace? And if so, how have you approached that?
We've been lucky. A lot of our guys are really sun smart anyway. So traditionally we did only have short sleeved. When I first started here 13 years ago, everybody was in short sleeved. We didn't provide hats or anything like that. So everybody's given a bucket hat. And we follow that up every year. And just with the nature of the work we do and the people that we work for, a lot of them have requested, even, you know, not just for the heat side of things, that our guys are in long sleeves. So they're kind of getting used to it. I guess if they have a preference, some of them, you know, will opt to wear the short sleeve. But again, you know, we're constantly on them about, you know, using their sunscreen and that sort of stuff. And although it's in the policy, we haven't made it a you have to, unless it's an actual requirement for the people that we're working for.
Just further to that, Michelle, do you have triggers? For example, total fireman days, expected temperature when they reach certain, you know, what's the forecast temperature, all that sort of...
It's not really triggers as such. We're just really conscious of the work they're doing more than the temperatures and that sort of thing. I mean, because some days could be, you know, only 25 degrees, but the high winds are a factor for us. So yeah, it's not just a temperature thing that will trigger, you know, what we're doing. You know, and we could have jobs scheduled in 2 days' time that, you know, tomorrow we're looking at the weather and going, no, we have to pull those. So, you know, it's ringing the customer and explaining to them, just due to weather forecasts and that sort of thing, we can't do you know, rain also impacts what we do. You know, if we're installing solar systems, we can't have our electricians on the roof. So, you know, for us, it's not just the heat that we're looking at. So there's no real trigger points. It's, and I'd hate to say it, it's just common sense for us. Like, yeah, and the managers themselves know, yeah, when to pull those sorts of jobs and that sort of thing. And the guys are really good at letting us know, you know, if they've looked at their schedule and they're like, oh, you know, I'm really not sure, can I start early? Or, you know, the boys are really good at managing that themselves as well.
Excellent. Yeah, really interesting. So if no one else has got any questions, thank you very much for that, Michelle.
No, that's okay. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah. All right, so I think we're over to Kerry now, who's going to talk in a bit more depth about heat waves and the Heatwave Help project.
Thanks, Simone. That was great, Michelle, and a really great lead into this. The focus of my presentation is going to be on the effects of helping us understand the effects of heat on our health and why it is also a health emergency. So not just bushfires, but like drought, it is something that is taking a toll on our health all the time. So much of what you've told us about there, Michelle, you're doing is highly recommended within this presentation. And there just might be a few other things to consider to add to it for businesses. So if you've got a phone on you and you're able to scan that QR code, I'll just leave it there for a second. It goes into a survey to just gauge how confident you feel at the moment about understanding what the risks are of extreme heat to your business, to other people, to yourself, and then how confident you feel about equipping others to address those risks. And while you're doing that, I'll just explain that this project is funded by the Australian Government in partnership with Victorian Government under the National Partnership Agreement for Disaster Risk Reduction. So the aim of this project is for us to reduce how much heat wave is a health emergency. It's a disaster for us. The HELP in HELP stands for Health Emergency for Local People. Like others, we acknowledge that we meet today under the skies and in the waterways and lands of a diversity of First Peoples. We pay respect to their elders, past, present, and emerging. And in doing so, we pay respect to their ways of living in these waterways, on these lands, under these skies, and the harm that has been caused in the past over 100 years to learning from those ways of living safely in the land and healthy lives and communities. And we need to commit to working together for the benefits of the broader community and future generations. It always was and it always will be Aboriginal land. So why are we talking about heat as a health emergency? We're doing that because heat kills more Australians than any other natural disaster. And that pictorial graph on the right there pictures that for us. The heat wave deaths outnumber the deaths due to cyclone, to flood, to bushfires, and all other emergencies in total. So each of those figures represents 100 deaths. And the studies have shown that from 1900 up to 2011, more people died from heat wave than any of the others together. Heat is not only a health emergency, it is costly. So in Victoria, this study on the economic impact of heat waves in Victoria was done and reported in 2019, so 6 years ago, and we know things have only increased since then. But I found these figures confronting for us to contemplate. $87 million was the cost of heat waves events in Victoria each year. 0.0225% of the gross state product each year. But we also know that the cost of heat wave is unequal across Victoria. It is great, the greatest proportion of the cost is in rural areas. 49%, almost half of the total economic impact of a severe heat wave event is incurred by the agricultural sector. $103 million is the calculation of the loss to the construction sector from an extreme heat wave event. So these were pretty confronting figures in 2019, and we now know that that has only increased, and that it's predicted that those figures could double if we do nothing to slow down the number and intensity and duration of heat wave events in our region and in Victoria. So to help us understand a little bit more about the impact of heat on our bodies and why it constitutes a health emergency, we just have a quick lesson in how does our body healthily respond to heat. Our natural cooling mechanisms are sweating and an increased heart rate. Sweating means that the evaporation of the sweat cools our skin, and our heart works harder to pump blood towards the skin to cool it down, to increase that evaporation. Severe heat places a strain on those natural systems, and it stops our body from working properly. The physical impacts are, well, if we're sweating a lot, we're getting dehydrated. Or if our heart is having to pump harder, so are our kidneys to keep, as they get a bit dehydrated and toxins increase in our system, our kidneys have to work harder, and all of our systems have to work harder to cope. And therefore, there will be a deterioration in any existing medical conditions that we have. It can lead to heat cramps, heat exhaustion, and heat stroke, which is life-threatening. 80% of people who get heat stroke die from it. And of the 20% who survive, they live with long-term impacts and organ damage to them. Now, we don't actually know if that figure is the same for regions like the Wimmera, because the 80% of people who survive heat stroke survive because they're able to get emergency assistance soon enough and the right kind of emergency assistance. And that is a challenge in the Wimmera. Heat also has a mental impact on us. It causes confusion. You remember Jess talking about your disaster brain? Well, heat is going to affect that disaster brain and make it harder to focus, cause irritability and mood swings. That's a physiological effect for us on our mental health. It's why we know that we have more violence, interpersonal violence during high temperatures, and people have more mental health crises during the heat. So who's at risk? Heat affects everyone, all of us. And some of us are more at risk of harm. We're going to have a look at that a little bit here. And with a focus on business, we're going to go through this resource that's been developed that you can promote in your business and your organisation. The first is a red side of the page that tells us that heat can be fatal. And we're going to look at these four risk factors around the acronym HEAT. So the H stands for home and your living conditions. That's things like how much shade is around your home, how much insulation you have, whether you've got big verandas that help cool the air before it gets into the house. It can even be about the colour of your roofs and whether they reflect heat or absorb it. It can also be about how much concrete is around your building and whether it holds the heat and reflects it into your home. Now, I would translate that across to your workplace, whether that's your home or somewhere else. Having a think about the infrastructure and your property and the location of your business. So how does heat affect temperatures inside your buildings and inside different rooms? So the rooms that have lots of electrical equipment going are going to be hotter. And it can be one of the reasons why it's really good to shut everything down at night when it's not being used so that you don't keep the heat in those rooms. The E stands for the environment, and we've called it their social exclusion. I'd want to just talk more about what the isolation, the geographical isolation or the social isolation of your business. How does the location of your business impact on the experience of extreme heat? So does it take longer to get supplies to where your business operates? What might be the barriers that isolate your business a bit from those communications as well as from transport and getting assistance? and keeping your business going. So how does the location of your business impact on that experience of extreme heat? So that's H&E, thinking about the home for your business, and it might be multiple sites, the various sites, and thinking about how heat will be affected both around that building as well as inside. How will you cool those spaces, and how will you address any isolation issues for the environment of your business? The next one is about actually staff and business visitors, all your stakeholders, including yourself. What are your risk factors? What are those red areas? And so we will all have varying responses to this. Your A is for age and underlying conditions. So we know that as we get older, our body's ability to regulate heat and temperature generally decreases, and so that places people who are older in a risk category. But we also know that your age, if you're younger, you will overheat more quickly. So young people, babies, children, their temperature is going to rise more quickly, whereas older people, we take longer to cool down. So age is a risk factor, but it's also a risk factor for different mental health effects of heat. So some recent studies in New South Wales have shown that young people are more prone to suicidal behaviour and ideation during hot weather. Some really confronting studies there that and we don't understand all the medical reasons for that now, but it's been observed that there are more emergency admissions for suicidal ideation and behaviour during hot temperatures. So we need to understand those risks and not just treat, oh, well, it's only if you're children or you're older people that you have various risks. Younger people can also have at any age. In fact, we can have underlying conditions. So if you have any kidney conditions, heart conditions, diabetes, many different conditions can increase your risk of experiencing heat stress, exhaustion, or heat stroke. So getting an understanding of that is really important for you and all your staff, so that we don't just have a one-size-all-fits approach to addressing the health and safety of our staff, as well as being aware that our different customers may also have different risks. So how are we making sure our business supports them to address those when they come into our business? That goes along with T, taking certain medications. So if you are taking heart medication or any medication for ADHD, for example, any mental health conditions, if you're taking any medication for that, all of these can affect your body's ability to manage heat. Any medications that change the way you sweat, the way your heart pumps blood around your system, and the way your brain functions can affect your body's ability to manage heat. And so we're encouraging everybody to make sure they check with their doctors and their pharmacists to understand how any medications you're on may be impacted by the heat. And that then translates to how does your business understand heat health and heat first aid? And are your first aid responders equipped to understand those risks and address them? And then how does that inform what kind of preventative measures do you take around your buildings, in your services, to make sure that people don't get too hot in the first place? So this is long before we've even got heat waves being triggered, warnings being triggered. So understanding who in your business might be at risk are you? When, where, and how? In what ways? So risk is multifaceted. It's not just you're either at risk or you're not. We need to keep growing our understanding about what situations, what times, and in what ways. And then the green is about there are ways to stay safe. And we've mentioned lots of these. Michelle gave some really good examples, and Christy and Jess have also built that into their presentations. All the ways to prepare for bushfire, to live with droughts, apply to living with heat. Stay cool. S is for stay cool and drink water. That means ensuring that there are rest breaks and that where there is cool, accessible drinking water. As a result of one of these workshops, one of the service organisations realised they needed to make sure they had a water fountain and fresh, clean water available in their waiting rooms for people that wasn't reliant on power, and that they needed to have a back supply of fresh water so that if everything else ran out, they would still be able to stay cool and drink water. Avoid being outside in the heat of the day, and Michelle talked about that, changing the times of when services are delivered in the most hottest tasks. It also includes promoting personal protective equipment, and Michelle mentioned a lot of those. We're also, and you can find this on any of the workplace health and safety websites, there are also cool vests for outdoor workers who are more at risk. People working on roofs are getting lots of reflective heat. There are cooling vests to keep your core temperature cool. You can also purchase, and you can brand them for your business, cool neck ties that keep those carotid arteries cool, pumping the blood between your heart and your brain. So thinking about and what personal protective heat equipment that you will promote in your business is really important. We've talked about rescheduling, and then Jess gave some really good suggestions for business continuity, as did Christy. We've got it there as F is for phone, family and friends. That includes all your workplace colleagues. So accessing and communicating emergency information and keeping all your staff, your customers and your suppliers and partners informed about what your heat plan is and how they can implement it with you. And E are those emergency alerts. We're promoting all three of these, making sure that you're signed up as a business to the Bureau of Meteorology app that will give you Wimmera District heatwave warnings. And there's also on the Department of Health, you can subscribe to their heat health warnings. That will be when we're going to have heat that is extreme enough to pose a threat to human health, even though it might not be classified as a heat wave, which is more about the duration over a number of days. So we recommend subscribing your business to get those heat health warnings, as well as being on the Vic Emergency app, where you can filter for heat health and get the warnings for your region. So there's some of all the ways to keep in touch. So Heat Safe stands for these take-home messages. We need to understand that heat can be fatal. It stops our body from working properly. It affects all of us, everyone, and some people are more at risk at certain times, in certain places, and in different ways. And there are ways to stay safe from heat and keep your business running. And I'll just leave that. I'll send out this presentation as a PDF with the webinar. They're all links where you can get more information on working in heat there. Let's keep promoting heat safe businesses in this network and across across the Wimmera. And if you've got a quick moment to scan that different QR code, it just takes you to the survey again and asks you the same questions, but after the session, to gauge if you feel any more confident now with understanding those particular health risks, why it is a health emergency, and how to promote that in your business to be a heat-safe business. Thanks, everyone. I'll see if I can work out how to turn off stop sharing. There it is.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Kerry. That was great. So much information in there. And yeah, I think the presentation will be great because there's so much we can draw upon and go back to. So last but not least is Lisa with some updates on what's been happening with changes in business regulations and rules. So unless anyone's got questions for Kerry, sorry, I should have asked that.
You're right.
All good, Dean?
I was just going to make a very quick comment that a lot of this is about leadership. And in business leadership, one of the things, and it's a crossover from business and sport as well. So things we do for, you know, we often, I was playing in a game of cricket once where it was 46 degrees and there was a lot of really ill-advised bravado and peer group pressure to be as tough as the next person, all that sort of stuff, and unrealistic expectations. You know, some people were a lot tougher in dealing with others, and there were people seriously suffering, and there was a lot of sick people after that day, and it prompted a whole series of changes in sport and cricket and cut-offs, and they tried to do a blanket thing, but there was a general thing, a general advisory went out that that if they were confronted with a hot conditions or whatever it is, and I assume this happens in business, that you assess everyone. That's where the leadership thing comes in. You know, who is capable. Sometimes it's warm, but it's hot. But what's hot? And that was one of the big questions. What is too hot to do things? And so there was a lot of that. So it came down a bit of personal leadership of groups and people. So I'm assuming that's the big crossover into business as well.
Absolutely, Dean. And we worked, part of this project has been us working with Wimmera Regional Sports Assembly, and we offered a Heat Safe Sports webinar to address those very same things about community sports leadership and how to understand the risks a bit more. So, yes, a lot of crossover, yeah. And it is a leadership issue. It's not about making people individually responsible to do that game of chicken. Oh, I'm struggling. It's actually, it's about us understanding we're all at risk here.
Yeah, there's a case of I've seen it at work. In my early years at work, there was no, I'm tough, I can deal with it. You know, Terry over here is doing it, so I'm doing it too. You know, there's that false, you know. Oh, by the way, but personally, I'm feeling really crook. You know, yeah. And that's for it might be for others to observe that or keep an eye on that type of thing. So, yeah, that ill-advised bravado. Anyway.
Excellent. Good discussion. All right. Well, we better get on to Lisa so that we can, all get out by lunchtime. So thank you, Lisa, for this. Yeah, we're going on to a completely different topic, but no less important one.
We are, and I appreciate some of mine might be for the recording and the group that watches later. So any questions through Simone as well. So quick legislative spotlight and update from me. And I guess one of the tie-ins to what we've been talking about is having people work from home, and that sometimes can be a mitigation and a good consideration, but we need to get it right as employers. So just to highlight, there's a bit of attention, particularly in the media from some recent cases that have come up. So I thought worth just whipping through what the requirements are for employers to be mindful that people can request to work from home if they've got some specific needs under the legislation, which I've put up on the screen there. So a range of full-time and part-time employees. Anyone can ask, but there's some groups of employees that have legislative entitlements under the Act, so very important to be aware of with that. And employers have obligations, what they need to do if they get a request around someone wanting to work from home on an ongoing basis typically, and it meets one of those entitlements listed previously, is they do need to respond within 21 days. And it's really tightening up under the legislation, is why I just wanted to emphasise this today. And there are key things that this written response has to include, obviously whether it's approved or declined. But importantly, a refusal can only be on reasonable business grounds, and if there's been discussion with the employee and an attempt to reach agreement, and also consideration of the consequences for refusing the employee's request. So to see how that plays out in reality, I've got a couple of cases to go through on this point. The first one, the case citation is at the bottom, but there was a small private school where a teacher asked for flexible work off the back of a return from maternity leave. And unfortunately, the employer didn't meet that requirement around the 21 days in terms of its response. And this was an interesting case because the school did go through the reasons why it would be very difficult to cover the requests of the teacher in terms of the hours she was seeking. There were operational impacts, there was increased cost, additional workload, etc. This is all things that are relevant under a refusal for the Act, and the Commissioner Matheson at first instance said, yes, these are reasonable grounds for refusal. The employee appealed, and the full bench, meaning this is now a case that has precedence, said while the timeline didn't invalidate the refusal, because they hadn't addressed in writing how the refusal would impact the employee, they hadn't met the requirements of the Act. And therefore, the Commission effectively approved that request to work from home, saying under the legislation there's a right, the employers have obligations, and this was obviously a significant outcome, and particularly something I think to be aware of for small businesses in meeting the obligations, because obviously workflow, availability and so forth can have a number of impacts. So key message in this one very clearly is there's rights and entitlements going both ways, and to make sure there's an awareness of the Act. The one that probably has attracted more media attention and of recent times is what I call I've titled it the Westpac case. Again, the citation is there. This was a case, single instance commission. In this case, asked to be able to continue to work from home in order to pick up and drop off children. There'd been a period of time over her many years of employment where she'd worked from a closer location, a bank office to her versus the corporate office. And Westpac, like many employers in coming out of post-COVID, had said, well, we want to see some face-to-face presence in the office. In this instance, they were saying 2 days a week is kind of our default policy. The Commission ruled in the employee's favour and ordered Westpac to grant her work from home request. There was criticism again of the employer not meeting this 21 days timeline, but most importantly it said you don't really have reasonable business grounds because she's worked from home for many years, she's met all of her requirements. You can't just put out a blanket policy, apply it to everyone and say that's a consideration under the Act. So it's not the end of, it's not an inability for employers to refuse a work from home requirement, but it is a very clear message that the things need to be considered under the Act and properly articulated. And the final, I guess, update for employers in that space, again, the subject of some significant media attention, is the announcement from the Allen government around their intention to introduce legislation around work from home for public and private sector workers who can reasonably do their job at home. There are some significant constitutional issues to be navigated, which in essence is that the federal government is responsible for legislation relating to the workplace, so it would need to come through state-held legislation, and the Equal Opportunity Act has been nominated for that, but that's one of the considerations that it would need to, the barriers in effect it would need to overcome in order to pass. So it's a bit of a watch and wait, but it's certainly something I'd expect to see more attention from, particularly for Victorians, given that announcement of the government. The other significant updates, which moving, probably quite strongly just into the employer sphere here, is Woolworths and Coles cases. So at different times in these forums, I've talked about cases against Woolworths and Coles where they've underpaid entitlements, particularly to, and most typically to middle managers, where they've been on a salary and the salary has been set to say this is compensation for everything. And then what's been happening is these middle managers are covering night shifts or evenings or weekends, and the amount that they'd ultimately been paid was not enough to compensate them. What this finding was, this most recent finding, was the Ombudsman pursuing these employers, Coles and Woolworths, and what it found was that set-off clauses, so an employer saying this is to compensate you for all penalties, entitlements and so forth, can only lawfully offset obligations falling in one pay period. So it's really important now that employers do review and understand how their contractual obligations are working where there is an award in place. I've noted some other decisions on there, particularly one of the full federal court, which does say, look, you can do it. With carry forwards, there are different ways to structure it, but it's not sufficient probably in the current climate. I would suggest with the combination of these cases to not be assessing how much people are actually being paid. So ongoing potential for appeal, but an awareness for employers that this is what that focus is back on to the award. And relatedly, record keeping, which I think is probably one that will have greater impact potentially for all employers. So same litigation, and I've got up there the Fair Work Act and its regulations, so it's very exciting stuff. But essentially, one of the regulations says that employers must maintain records in a form that is readily accessible to an inspector. So Woolies, for example, works off a system called Kronos, which is a fingerprint system. It does record when people come and go. However, they said, no, that's not enough because you can't produce it. It's sitting in a payroll system. So this is also an element that got a lot of media attention, because if the payroll systems are something really sophisticated like Woolworths, and fingerprinting is pretty sophisticated when it comes to that, don't meet the test, there's going to be implications for employers across the country. So again, it's a bit of a watch and wait, but just an awareness that if there is the opportunity to consider how you are tracking your employees' time and attendance against things like overtime, against how they're being paid, when you take both elements of this case, it's probably a signal to make sure that your record keeping and your processes are as tidy as they can be. And again, I'll be through Simone if anyone's got any questions on that, happy to speak in more detail to either of those cases. And the final note to consider, we are in summer, we're coming up to our Christmas period. So I would say it's that usual time. I think we're right probably on the knocker for most awards for making sure that employees are advised of any Christmas close down and what the intention for businesses are there, where they're doing a close down under the award. And finally, and I've got a case citation that came out after this agenda was finalised, but there is some attention and some recent court decisions about businesses that are requiring employees to work public holidays. So for employers who do require their employees to work, to make sure that they're up to date with the implications of that case and reasonable right to refuse. So that is me. I nearly put a picture of the Grinch on my last slide because, as always, full of good news for employers and business owners in matching their obligations. But I'll leave it there to get us out on time, and I'll go back to you, Simone, unless there's any questions.
Thanks, Lisa. Lots of stuff in there to
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 warm
get
the
your
heart.
head around.
Yeah.
Has Kerry or Dean, have you got any questions?
Just another comment. Interesting one from the Wimmera, but just made me think about this was in the Wimmera, when it comes to heat, we'll often say, look, go to somewhere with air conditioned, but the circumstances are that there's a difference between evaporative, reverse cycle, and refrigerated air conditioning. So I can remember a time working back in a newsroom many years ago where the management had installed an air conditioner into a place with no windows. Now, we thought that the air conditioning was a refrigerated system, but it was an evaporative system. Now, we all know now that they can't work without windows. And so we were sitting in a sweat pool in our newsroom, and I can't believe, like, it would never get away with it these days. And so that would be a great, we've got to go and work from home a circumstance, because we don't have an environment that's conducive to not only work but also health. So and as we do have a circumstance where we have extreme heat comes in, then it can be followed by a period of high humidity where a lot of the air conditioners stop working if they're only evaporative air conditioners. So just a little bit of a side just comment, just from a memory type of thing, that made me think about the working from home scenarios and how they can vary a fair bit, and especially on the Wimmera when it kept circumstances changing. So
yeah, and that's absolutely come up, with some employers I've been working with recently, and room changes and different buildings. And as well, it prompts me, I suppose, Dean, just to say, obviously there's the business reasons I've gone through around return to work, but then where are you sending people? What is their home environment? And there's all of those safety considerations, including how is it safer, better, different? What does it actually look like from the employer perspective?
It's a great connection between the two concepts, the two different topics today, because I was also thinking, Lisa, about a lot of community service organisations have policies around people being able to work from home on extreme heat days, of it not being the safest thing is not to travel great distances in the Wimmera to come to a workplace. However, they are often also organisations that are delivering their services to people in their homes, and they can transition to telephone support for those services. But if the staff aren't actually equipped and resourced to be able to do that kind of work from home, as in telephone support, then there's some gaps in implementing that kind of work. So I think it'd be great to see how those things could integrate over time. Yeah,
absolutely.
What it means to equip people to work effectively from home. Yeah.
Really.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Yeah, there's just so much food for thought after these presentations. And yes, we have recorded it. And so we'll put it up for everyone else to read, to watch. And thank you all for your time. And fantastic work
Thanks,
today.
Simone. Take care,
Thanks
everyone.
for organising us, Simone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.